Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host Sam Foote.
And Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Office 365 focused IT security professionals. Each episode, we talk about a specific topic in the space. This week is episode 8 of season 3. We're going to have a chat around Azure Key Vault, a secure location developers can use to store sensitive information that can be programmatically accessed in their applications. Hey Alan, how's it going?
Hey Sam, it's not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Another week, another podcast. It seems to fly by, which is good. Episode 8 of season 3, motoring along, which is, really good. And hopefully some exciting updates coming for the podcast soon. Branding and website, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, looking forward to that. And I can't believe we're on episode 8 already.
Yeah, it's definitely for me, prep and getting things sorted is feeling more refined every episode we do it. Right, getting into the swing of dedicating a night a week to the podcast and moving it along. So yeah, I'm having lots of fun doing it. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. I think our changes to our content creation sort of ideas, things like that, our show note prep and stuff like that is our tooling is definitely a lot better now than
Yeah,
what
I
we
think
had.
just our workflow is just so much better, isn't it? Right, start to finish. Because before, season one, we just had no clue, sort of what we were doing, and then season two, we started to work on still getting content out, consistently, but then also improving that workflow, which I think is, made it a lot easier to actually create. So yeah, it's been really good. Okay, so Azure Key Vault, Alan. Um, Alan's going to take the sort of point lead on this one as our subject matter expert, as Alan does love a good key vault. So this should be a good episode, and hopefully others that have maybe not had any direct exposure to it or are wondering how key vault operates, this could be a good one for you. So let's get into it. So Alan, what is Azure Key Vault?
So I will just point out that I probably only use about 20% of this probably in my day to day. So know about some of the other stuff, but maybe not as deep as the part that I use. So Azure Key Vault is as it sounds, a vault to store keys and secrets, um, and of course securely. So um, these keys could be anything really. It could be from API keys to Azure AD, Service Principal secrets or app registrations, um, passwords, certificates, and uh, crypto crypto keys. Um, So yeah, that like I said, they're stored in a container. There are two types of containers that you can sort of do when you create them, and one is just a vault. I say just a vault, but in effect a cloud vault. And then the other one is a managed hardware security module based one, so HSM.
So actually, the name isn't actually that descriptive of, you know, maybe originally that's what it was just for, right? But we've got many different types of. Is it effectively any sort of secure strings can be stored, Alan? Because it could be other sort of sensitive information, could it?
Yeah, so I think it, like you said, probably started off with being a location for certificates to be stored, which kind of make sense of it being called Key Vault. Um, But yes, it now can be any sort of string, like you said. Yes, um, and there are various, there's versioning on it, there's purge protection and things like that on it as well to help do it. And of course, access is secured quite well, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay, so we've got to place a secure container that we can store potentially sensitive information inside. So can you give us some examples of why you might want to use a key vault?
Some of it, the way that I've used it is that before managed identities at least came in, and where we didn't have to sort of manage those secrets. Um, when doing stuff with Azure Graph and things like that, where you've got to have a service principal, with a client ID and secret, because I use a lot of logic apps, things like that, then I use it in those flows, so that I don't have to store that secret in plain text, in effect, in the logic app. I can secure it in there, and then I can give access to the key vault from the logic app. And this can be, again, when we talk about it later around the accessing it, there could be a managed identity accessing those keys or certificates, etc. So sort of one example. Again, you could use it for function apps and app service. So as part of some of the that we think about this now, the parameters or the configuration settings, I think it is, Sam. I can't remember what part of that part it is. You can in effect do a secure, like a link to it as part of the parameters. So it links to the key vault, and then you just give the system managed identity for that app service or function app access to the key vault, and then it just pulls that as a parameter. So you don't even have to worry about in your code trying to connect to the key vault. The actual function app or service app or app service can do it for you.
Yeah, I've definitely seen before from app service and function apps a lot of potentially sensitive information being stored, in the configuration section of app service, and I think there's we'll come on to RBAC a bit later about securing Key Vault and why it's different to maybe other structures inside of Azure, but um, this is a way that you can effectively hide away the access to those secrets away from potentially, say, the owner or operator of that app service, because as Alan mentioned, you can connect your configuration parameters directly to Key Vault. So you could have somebody else with a different RBAC structure managing, the keys and the keys and potential secrets, and sort of what should we say, transparently pass that through into the application code. I suppose once you get into the application code, you still got access to them there, but from a portal administration perspective, you don't have access.
Yeah, definitely. And some of the other things, so I've also used it in Power Platform, so bringing keys into that environment, which has been useful at times. The other ones as well, which is more around actual Azure services. So this is Azure Disk Encryption. So they use it to store the recovery keys. I think it is, isn't it? In there. So that's one thing, and that's all sort of self-managed itself, providing um, the virtual machine has permission to put that information in there. And probably from an access perspective, so it doesn't necessarily have to be something in Azure that can access it, providing that they've got a service principal that can connect to it. You can use, there's a REST API, and Microsoft has quite a few examples of different code languages that can examples to to be able to connect to it. So that's like .NET, Java, Node.js, and Python, and then like I said, there's a REST API. Mostly around the REST API, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking about not the REST API. I'm thinking of the Logic App connector. I was going to say that you can only pull data from it, because that's what we found recently, wasn't it, Sam? That you can only read the secrets, all the metadata on the secrets, but you couldn't actually create secrets or update them, could you?
No, you can via the REST API, right? But
Yeah.
just not the actual inbuilt connector. No, it's a bit of a gap there.
Yeah, so you can just sort of talking about access, is that one of the security parts to it is that you can lock down how you access it, access the key vault. It can be out on the internet, which then just needs RBAC permissions to access it. You can lock it down to certain IPs, to Azure services like disk encryption and things like that. But also you can hook it up to you can put a private link onto it so that it can join up to a key vault. So if you're running all your services through a VNet, a network, and that you can hook it all up into that.
So effectively, this Key Vault kind of has a network interface, not an actual NIC, but it's got network connectivity, right? And you can decide, um, like other the way that I sort of see it is it's very similar to app service like firewall rules as well. When you build those out, you're getting the ability to really in a really granular firewall based way limit access to that, and as you say, binding it to a VNet so that you could theoretically have it completely private, from a networking perspective anyway, is really powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so in the original, when I asked you about the overview, you explained there's two types: Vault and Managed HSM. Can you just take us through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So the Vault is really just in effect a cloud-based container to store it. It does keys and certificates, um, and the cryptographic keys. Um, that's kind of fully managed by Microsoft. You don't sort of really look after that in some sense, apart from obviously the RBAC and side of things, and that's probably the simplest to set up. Um, and then you've got the managed HSM, the hardware security module, and that is um, that kind of come under. There's two tiers of Key Vault. There's standard and premium. Um, Premium brings the ability to be able to use HSM. That's the sort of key main difference around them. Um, so the managed HSM, as it sounds, is managed by Microsoft. It provides it's in a single tenant. It's zone resilient where it's available. Um, it's highly available, and and it's store and manage your cryptographic keys. Um, it's mainly it's mainly used around when you have very highly sensitive keys, or maybe you have to meet regulatory compliances around it. Owning having hardware modules and things like that. So that's really the main kind of things. Apart from the price, which we'll talk about later, there's a big difference.
Yeah, so I suppose if you're not in a regulatory scenario where you potentially need sort of protection from Microsoft, I assume that's where I call it standard vaults would be fine for you in that scenario. And then if you are at a sort of that you need to follow a regulatory compliance framework that's maybe tighter than that, there is a hardware based, I suppose, end to end process there for you. Should you want to protect yourself from Microsoft, not that you need to, but potentially I should say, but you do have that option if you need to.
Yeah, and because it's managed, you have to worry about looking after the hardware and things like that. Because there's some services that um, I'm thinking of the things like double key encryption for information protection, where you need to manage that. You can include HSM into that, but that is all kind of like you look after it. Um, so so yeah,
Yeah, because we've got customer managed keys in a lot of areas, haven't we? Right, and I suppose we don't have the concept of that here, do we? We have sort of Microsoft managed or sort of then hardware based um, you know end to end management of those because I assume that because this can actually store things like private keys, right? You know, theoretically it could store well could store your customer managed keys as well. So there's a it's like chicken and egg. Like you need something hardware to to protect that system end to end, right? Because you can't use a customer managed key that Microsoft then like control, if that makes sense, right? You need
yeah, yeah,
so
that is true. Yeah, customer
that's
managed key stored in a key vault, which is managed by Microsoft. Yeah,
yes, exactly.
yeah,
So it's like chicken
obscurity,
and egg, yeah.
security through security for your obscurity on the other services. Yeah,
Yeah, well, it's just yeah, but yeah. So it's kind of like, what's the point of using all these customer managed keys when your key vaults are managed by by Microsoft anyway? Not that I'm saying you should go to managed HSM level because it's rather expensive. Spoiler alert. um, okay, cool. Anything else on those two types, Alan? I think vaults is where we usually hang out, isn't it, Al? Because we don't really have many other requirements, for the stuff we sort of build.
Yeah, no, we mainly stay in vaults itself, yeah, because we only really use the secrets part from the stuff that we do. Um, but I mean, probably going back to our sort of previous question, it it can actually be anything in there. And previously, before using parameters and logic apps, I used to use it as a single location for those parameters in some sense, because if we had multiple logic apps needing the same information, it's almost like a central store for those variables, which could be used for any app, including could go across multiple like function apps and including like um, Power Platform and keeping them secure. I mean, some of them may not be sensitive, but it's one way that we did start to use it. I mean, we've moved away from it a little bit um, because we're using parameters and things like that. But yeah, it's kind of a solution we had as well.
Yeah, I think you've just got to take, any bit of data you might use in your application. And you think, is this sensitive? Would I be happy with this being publicly available? And if that's a no, then key vault's a pretty obvious place to store it, right? If you've just got configuration parameters, maybe for your logic app, which maybe defines like the time of day it runs, or some other spurious value that you need to potentially store, then that's absolutely fine in a parameter, right? Because you don't need to have the overhead of and also being reliant on key vault in order to grab that information. So yeah, for me, like it said, I think that's the conclusion that we've come to, is that if it is sensitive, it gets stored in key vault, for extra protection.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah.
Okay. So can we talk a little bit about setup? How easy is it to set up? Am I going to have to spend multiple hours PowerShell APIs to get this thing out the door?
So I don't know about the managed HSM because I've never needed to do that, so I can't really comment on that. So I don't know how long that might take to spin up to allocate you maybe some hardware and things like that. Um, but the general vault, um, it's it's relatively easy. There's very little configuration initially. There's some caveats that we need to talk about. Um, but yeah, so you go into create a key vault, you search for it, you give it a name. That's one caveat. I'll talk about it in a minute. You choose your location, your resource group, um, standard or premium, um, and then so let's go back to the name. So I can't remember what it is, but it's not. It's got to be unique across the whole of the resource across Azure, and it's only something like 12 characters or something like that. Sam, I can't remember what it is. It's short. No, it's shorter than that, isn't it? I think.
It's either 13 or 23, isn't it? For key vault?
Oh, I don't think it's 23.
I don't know.
But yeah,
Somebody
it's
needs to
it's
have a word with Azure platform team about the differences between naming length and naming standards in Azure, because it always really confuses me. I don't have my cheat
uh,
sheet here.
no, but yeah, it's short. So if
It
you've
is
got
short, yeah.
a standard, it's kind of similar to storage counts, isn't it? Where you can't have dashes and everything; it's all going to be lowercase and things like that. Um, but yeah, it's short. So if you've got any naming conventions that you would follow, it's probably going to break all of those. We've had that problem recently.
It's
But it's
I was one off. It's 24 for a key vault.
uh,
So
okay. I didn't.
yeah,
Okay,
I just looked it up. Sorry, just googled
that's all right.
it.
That's all right. It's that's good. Yeah, I'm just thinking about some of the stuff we work on, and we still can't get it to fit in 24 characters. Our our build
Yeah, because
recently.
especially when you're talking about, cloud adoption framework naming standards and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, trying to make it truly unique and yeah, it's a bit of a pain.
Yep. Okay. So as part of the other setup as well, you can enable purge protection, which means that it can't be deleted for X amount of time. So that's really good from a security perspective. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. Um, but after that, and you click save and finish, give it some tags, and complete it within. I think it's like less than 30 seconds. This build, it's almost like instantly done. It's there for you to use, and then you can go in there. And then we'll talk about RBAC, and then you can start using it. Um, one thing to consider if you do have purge protection on, you can't disable it after you've done it. It's only done on creation. And if you decide to delete it, because maybe you're doing, maybe the example is that you're doing Terraform and you're testing your deployment and destroy and things like that. You destroy it or delete it, but it doesn't actually delete it because it's purge protected for 30 days. And you can't recreate it because all the names have to be unique. So you're stuck in a little bit of a waiting game at that point. We've had that a couple of times, Sam, haven't we, where we've turned it on and not realised.
Yeah, purge protection is great until you actually want to purge something. I think that's but yeah, definitely it is one of those potential gotchas. Yeah, definitely 100%.
But yeah, it's. I think the worst part, the hardest part, is getting the name because, as I said, it has to be unique across the Azure environment. Doesn't matter what region or anything like that. So that could be not. It's not. I've never hit anything really, but you might have something that you're doing dev, and then you've actually chosen the production name or something by accident, and then you get into that purge situation.
Okay, so yeah, so as you said, it spins up pretty quickly, and I can definitely vouch for that. When I see my terraforms running, it definitely doesn't take long to create a key vault. That's for sure. And once it's set up, Alan, do we have portal access to update all of the various different types of data that we might want to store in it? How do we go about accessing it?
So even if you're an owner, so the highest tier of access, um, you can't access the keys or certificates, which is very unique, I think, and good. But yeah, we've even if you've got contribution access, you create it. You can't then change those keys. The only way you can change it by actually giving yourself some additional roles on that subscription or on that key vault to do it. And that is, I think it's Key Vault admin or administrator, or there's things like secrets officer, Key Vault secret officer, and Key Vault certificate officer. That will then allow you to have access to the keys to be able to even create them, let alone read them. So it's really good. It does so to be able to give to provide those roles to a user. You either have to have own or you have to have the user admin privilege or privileged admin or user administration access or something like that. The other role that provides the RBAC side of it to be able to give it. So I've been stuck sometimes when creating key vaults for projects, things like that, and then you go there to create your keys. The last bit you need to do, and you can't access it. And then you got to wait for someone to give you access to do it, or give you PIM access to elevate to that role.
Yeah, we've had that where we've been contributor because we've said no, we definitely don't want owner. Like we don't we don't want to have to worry about like our back of other people and things like that. And then you forget it's like, oh, but Keyvault has its own R back structure really built into it, and then you're like, damn it, I do actually need to be able to do that just for just for Keyvault. So it can be a bit of a pain sometimes, like you say, but I think it's I think what it just shows is it does show that even if you are, I mean, I suppose if you are an owner, you've got permission to add your own, add yourself to those roles, I suppose. But that is all audited, I suppose. And maybe we should talk about PIM as well. Do you want to talk about that now? As about how you could potentially secure access to those with PIM? Just a quick deviation. Sorry, Alan.
That's all right. It'll tie on to a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it, when I went through PIM,
Exactly.
Privileged
Yeah.
Identity
Yeah.
Management, when we talk about
Yeah, I
that.
just think Key Vault's a great use case for it, right? Because there is such sensitive information in Key Vault.
Yeah, so to add extra security on it and those roles that I was just talking about, even uh, just in fact, just before we talk about PIM, there are some other roles there that you can do, which are in effect, security or secrets reader. So they're the ones that you'd give to your services trying to access it, and you can. Whilst we don't normally do it ourselves because of the key vaults are specific to the logic apps we're using and things like that. I think you can actually do RBAC on the actual secrets as well, so you can go down to that level if you need to, which I think is really good as well. But yeah, privileged identity management allows you to do just-in-time access um, to roles in Azure AD and Azure and various other places. So just a quick recap there in case anyone hasn't listened to the other episode. But in this scenario, what you can do then is do a PIM role against the secrets administrator or secret officer, and put requires MFA and put an approval process on it. So you know when people are accessing that key vault and that they've got a legitimate reason to access those keys, because like you said, or like we've said, I should say, those that information is sensitive to the applications running and things like that.
Yeah, because even if you're sort of an owner or operator of, say, some infrastructure, that doesn't necessarily give you the right to be able to, look at sensitive information, right, in the environment. You might have RBAC structures in place to, protect data stores of sensitive information. If you're running, say, um, some sort of system that stores a potentially highly confidential information, the just because somebody's an administrator of the infrastructure doesn't necessarily give them the day-to-day right to be able to access that information. It might be that they need to give justification to do that. So really, because Key Vault is sort of the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, right? It's potentially okay. It might not actually be sort of PII sensitive data, but it could potentially arm you with the access to be able to do that. I'm thinking like uh, private keys that are used to private um, private like values that are used to say generate tokens, as part of a token exchange inside of an API. Yeah, given that master key, you could then theoretically masquerade as as that API and generate your own tokens to be used. So so from an attack perspective, there's you know it's not the actual data itself, but it could be easy access to the data that's important with these keys. So I think if you are an organization that has um, if you've got to the level of PIM, especially in Azure, right, Alan? Azure PIM is um, should we say that's another level on top of AAD, really, in terms of uh, I'm going to call it maturity, really, in Azure, right? Because um, I've seen lots of tenants which are just like blanket owner across all subscriptions. No pimming into different environments, things like that. I'm not saying that's best practice, but I have seen that in the wild. But PIM in Azure is maybe should we say it's more complicated than Azure AD just because of the number of roles and the scopes of those roles? I suppose it can become a little bit
Y-
complex, can't it?
Yeah, Azure AD is very, I say, static. There is quite a lot of roles there, but it's only one
Yes, it's only
one
once.
location, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
only
Yeah,
it's only like 30. I don't know how many. I can't remember how many roles there, but say it's like 30 roles for one Azure AD. You don't have 10 Azure ADs, do you? Where
no.
with Azure, you might have multiple resource groups, and maybe you want a different RBAC model based on those resource groups. So that could be, one times X, or 10 times X, whatever your roles are. You might have multiple subscriptions that you want to manage, and then you've got the whole management group layer as well. So it can get quite complex there from a PIM perspective, but um, it depends how large the environment is and how granular you want to be with those controls.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to dissuade anybody of PIM in Azure, but I think it does, from a structure perspective, it does need to be thought about a little bit more. And there is potentially, you can introduce extra complexity there if you so wish. But using PIM to allow people to elevate to access these potentially highly sensitive, keys is really powerful, especially with the audit trail and the justification that needs to be put in place, especially with the time, bound nature of it. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of it for sure in Azure.
Yeah, and going through that approval process as well doesn't have to be just a self elevation. If you have to go through some sort of approval process to say I'm accessing these keys to update it because I've got the new one, or
Like, I don't mean
yeah,
to.
I
I
need.
also don't mean to be really funny, but like, how often do you really, from a day-to-day perspective, need to access a key vault? It's usually storing. Okay, maybe it is storing time-bound information, and you need to go and update it. But from my perspective, having to wait for approval for an elevation for key vault, I don't particularly think is you know a massive overhead for a lot of users. I wouldn't say.
No, no. Like I said, using measured entities and other service principals to access it to read, that's that wouldn't go through PIM because that's a service running day in day out. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, okay, so we can store. So the first sort of thing I think about, right, is we could store, keys, potentially private keys, certificates. Let's call it any sort of secret that you might have. Passwords, master tokens, X, Y, or Z. Um, does it have a sort of life cycle management part to it? I'm thinking, my keys expire over time. They maybe need to be, renewed and refresh. What about that?
yes, so I briefly talked about some of that. We've sort of spoken about some of it previously, but yes, it does have against the keys, or the secrets at least, and the keys to be honest. But the secrets, yes, you can put an expiry date on them. You can also put an activation date. So maybe you've got something preparing to come into service as a secret, um, and yeah, you can put an expiry on it, and then in effect, it stops that key from being used. Then, um, as well as versioning, so you can see the different versions of the key that the secret. So at least then, if by accident it's bit expired, or um, you've created a new key on top of it, you've got that history as well. And there's still in effect, it's soft delete. Previously, you were able to choose whether to enable or disable soft delete, but Microsoft have in effect made it default now, and you can't turn it off, which is great. Um, so yes, you can do expiry. You can add tags to the secrets as well. So maybe if you're doing some searching from your app to identify those tags or those secrets, it can cut down the search or the filters. Um, Rotation. So on the certificate side, you can rotate the keys as and when you require to. And same thing with as the secrets, you've got expiry dates on there, so they become expired. Um, and like we talked about, you got purge protection, which is more around the key vault itself, where you can stop it from being accidentally deleted. Maybe even maybe that's from an internal rogue employee, maybe a bad actor that's in your Azure, or maybe just by accident deleting that resource group and then breaking your production system maybe. So it does protect you against that sort of stuff rather than yeah, I think that's the main reason, isn't it, Sam? So yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's all around, for instance, if you generated like a highly secure private key, that is maybe really important to your applications and your processes. One of the challenges of that is, well, one is keeping it secure, right, which is a challenge. Having an RBAC structure around it, which is what Key Vault gives us, really, right? It's extra layers of potential protection for those keys. But then the other one is also um, protection against deletion. Because if you were to lose that key, if for any reason, um, cryptographically, it could be very challenging to potentially, have secure access to systems, get into systems, and and to actually refresh that. So I think that's where purge protection comes in, and it basically says, if you accidentally, um, fat finger screw up and click on the wrong thing, right, and happen to, you know, dance past all the warnings and everything like that, purge protection is going to kick in, and do that. And we do see, Azure policy that's in place and standards which do say that purge protection should be enabled, for those levels of protection. Um, Policy can also bring in things like enforcing that items should expire after a certain amount of time, so you're not creating long-running keys, and things like that. So not only are you getting like a bucket to store your stuff in, you've also got functionality to control access to that bucket of information. Best practice in terms of managing it, and also best practice in terms of accidentally deleting potentially really sensitive and important keys.
Yeah, yeah. And I've not done it yet. I've not accidentally deleted one yet. It's not necessarily hopefully I don't, but it's more around
I
when
I,
we're
I have in real life.
oh right, okay.
Yeah, it's not great. Trust me. That's a story that's never going to see the light of day. But yeah, you definitely don't want to accidentally delete a private key. Trust me.
Well, I'm just thinking around some of the scenarios that you might use it. I'm thinking if you've got an app service where you're running your website and you're using it as your SSL key, and it's being your private key stored in there. Yeah, it's great. It's away from the website. No one hopefully can pwn it from the site if there's whatever. But yeah, if that disappeared, then
Just think
or
of
got
something
stolen
like
or whatever.
just think of like a private key that you might SSH to a Linux box with.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yes.
That's definitely not my example. But if you talk to lots of sysadmins and developers that have to use private keys to access sensitive systems, you could potentially completely lock yourself out of certain systems. I have been on projects before where that has happened, and luckily we've had access to, say, maybe sort of some sort of administrative interface where we've been able to back it up. But effectively, you then get to the part where you just have to nuke the box and move it across. And so there is a real, from a deletion perspective, there is a real danger there. But I mean, all of my examples are from years and years and years ago. It's not.
Not
There's
recent.
well, there's tooling and everything to do that now. Like well, things like Key Vault exist. And there are other
Mm.
systems that are similar to Key Vault. Um, Not just cloud based, but also on prem and on device and different things like that. Um, but for me as a um I'm not going to call myself an ex developer because I don't think I am an ex developer, but for somebody that just develops less now, I have seen those challenges in the real world. So that's why I absolutely love Key Vault, because it takes a lot of, I can sleep easier at night knowing that, yeah, there's something else managing all of those challenges for me, should I say. Definitely.
Yeah, well, I did see the other day, whilst we were testing out that Bastion, that when if you're doing SSH, you can actually select, get your key from the key vault, so you don't even have to know it, just have access to it,
Eh,
which is great as well, isn't it? Because it means you don't one have to manage it, but two, no one can pwn it from you because you don't have it.
You don't have it. I don't know. All I know is I've got like, I can potentially, pim into this role, which allows me to get access to this key, which then allows me access to this box, right? And if
Yeah,
you're using Bastion, that box is probably not connected to the internet, right? So you're connecting to a, I'll use air quotes, isolated environment via a key that is completely managed via, you know, Azure AD roles and PIM to block access to it. You know, um, I'm not sure how impactful that is for a user. Okay, maybe if they can't self elevate and you've got PIM there where they have to wait for approval to elevate, but maybe you don't even do that. You just do self elevation. Go into PIM, bang, I want access to this server for 2 hours. Granted, okay, great. I've got access to the key vault, and now I can pull my SSH key from Bastion to use it.
yeah.
Like
I guess yeah, you can make it as uh, not necessarily saying more secure in that because all these functions are adding to it. But if you need more control, I think it is against different resources. Maybe you do go to that level of approval and things like that. If it is highly sensitive,
Yeah, but it all comes down to like permissions creep, doesn't it? And this is what happens over
yeah,
time is, users get more and more powerful over time and inadvertently. We're not talking, this isn't like malice. This is just like the fact of, you know, uh, admin A was working on this project. Admin A now works on this project and this project and this project. And by the time you get, maybe they've got multiple roles that they've been in the organization, and now, maybe they've gone up management layers, and now they've still got their old access and things like that, right? That's where all of these different, you can get these scenarios where somebody is, from a permissions perspective, is very powerful, and they are like a golden target for somebody to effectively take over their identity. So we want those challenges when they're actually asking for access to sensitive areas, you know, because maybe that person's moved to like a project management role, let's say, or something like that, or they're a team lead, still technical, but maybe they're managing people, and then they suddenly request PIM for a sensitive area or for key vault, and you're like, that's not right. That user, even though they're still PIM eligible, they shouldn't be doing it. So you've got those gates in place as you go, which is a lot more powerful, in my opinion.
yeah, definitely. And I just thought about something. Another way to help with security is also to enable the Defender for Cloud workload against it. Where it looks at the transactions and the activity within it and how often stuff is accessing it. So that will help with seeing if malicious IPs or anything like that are trying to access it, or all of a sudden there's a spike in access maybe.
It's giving you that baselining, isn't it? What does normal look like, on an everyday basis? Like this secret is accessed once a week, and just weirdly now it's being accessed 20 times a week, right? Like
Yeah,
what's going on there. So you're just layering on, aren't you? Different solutions there to give you visibility. Okay. What? So the big, we've been talking about Key Vault for 44 minutes. So I think unless there's any other areas, Alan, I'm going to talk to you about the costs. But are there any sort of other functional areas that you want to talk about um, for Key Vault that you think people should know?
not off the top of my head. I can't think of anything.
The only one that I've got is there is region connectivity with Key Vault, isn't there? I think it's definitely for Azure Disk Encryption. You have to have your Key Vault in the same region. Is
Yes,
that
okay.
right? If I
Y-
to
yeah,
access it, is that correct? If you're going
uh,
inside Azure,
yeah. If it's Azure services or you're hooking up to a um, a network VNet, then yes, it has to be in the same region.
That's right, isn't it?
But
But
I think you can access it. I think you can access them in different regions um, if you're just accessing it, over the internet.
yeah, like via the REST API and
Yeah.
via those sorts of things. Yeah. Yeah, that was the only thing, because I'm sure I've had it in the past where we've gone to deploy Azure Disk Encryption and we haven't had a key vault in the right region. I'm sure I've bumped into that before. Just something in the back of my mind that um, I just had there. Okay, let's talk about pricing then, Alan. How much is this bad boy going to cost me?
So if we're talking about vaults, and like I said, there are two tiers, but in the vaults world, it doesn't matter because the only difference, like I said, is really having the HSM protection. So to store to not to store secrets, but to access them or to do transactions against secrets for 10,000 transactions, it is a whopping 2.5p. Which,
Sorry, for how many
yeah,
transactions?
10,000.
2.5 pence per 10,000 transactions.
Yes. So you'd have to have a very busy website or something to do that. The logic apps we build definitely don't run anything like that in our sort of thing. So that's good. So it's kind of cheap, very cheap if you're starting out with it at least. Maybe you have got something that is very transaction heavy, but again, you have to be doing a lot to even break a pound. Even 100,000 transactions is going to be 25p.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
um, Certificate operation. So renewing a certificate is £2, £2.42, £2.43 if you round up per renewal. So maybe they're once a year, maybe once every 2 years if you've got a 2 year cert. And all other operations is again 2.5p per 10,000 transactions. So accessing that cert, I think that's pretty good.
Yep.
There is a preview managed Azure storage account key rotation. I think this is brand new. I think it's only been out a couple of weeks. It's free in the preview, but they're suggesting that GA is going to be 81p per renewal. So again, not too bad. So I'm guessing that's per rotation that you do. Software protected keys. These are generally the same again between standard and premium. RSA 248-bit keys are again 2.5p per 10,000 transactions. Advanced key types, which is RSA 3072, RSA 4096, elliptic curve keys. They're 12.2p per 10,000 transactions. So again, nothing to really worry about unless you're doing a lot of transactions. So then we come to HSM protected keys. So you can't get them on standard, as we kind of said before. In premium or 2048 key, 2048 key is 81p per key per month and 2.5p per 10,000 transactions. Sounds okay. Advanced keys for your first 250 keys is £4 per key, which is quite a lot more than the standard stuff. And then there's various tiers for that. Rotation is 81p for those keys, and then the actually managed HSM pool, so your actual hardware. So this is £2.59 per hour.
Wowza. So I suppose what you're saying is that I need to have a hardware HSM pool before I even start to use hardware HSM. Is that correct? Because I suppose I need a pool in order
Yes.
to run those keys, right? So I've not only got the per key cost and transaction costs, I've also got the underlying I suppose it's hardware or dedicated hardware for me to utilize.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know at the moment 'cause I've never deployed it because I've not had a need to, but I wonder if you're able to have multiple pools in the same key vault to maybe have different, you know, sets of secrets that you need to keep separate, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But
Yeah, but as you
was
can
it two
tell,
pound
that's the
fifty
reason
nine?
why yeah, we haven't actually got to that stage of utilizing it. It would be very what I'd love to see is I'd love to talk to an organization that's using Key Vault at that sort of level with HSM, and also somebody that's got sort of scaling issues with Key Vault. Because a lot of the we said like per 10,000 was like 2.5p and things like that. It really makes you think about how much they actually make from Key Vault, and how because well, I suppose there's lots of Key Vaults anyway. If people, because it's per 10,000, right? I assume you pay for your first 10,000 once you start using it. I would have thought, right? So, so but there must be work. I'm just thinking that because usually what you would do is if it was an application, for each instance, you would load your Key Vault keys and then you'd cache them into maybe you cache them into memory or protected memory. We talked about confidential computing a few weeks ago, didn't we? Um, so I do wonder, how. But I suppose, I suppose the other side of it is if you do have keys that are maybe shared between applications and workloads, that those numbers could rocket up. I suppose.
Yeah, they could, and you might have something that is, it might be part of a function app where there's multiple things posting to it. Maybe that it's running new runs and things like that. I guess if it was a um not a consumption one, but maybe it's always on the the app service version that you can just have multiple the function app can trigger multiple times at the same time. I don't know. I can't think of well any of the apps that we build at least. I build at least. I don't think I'd ever see hitting that within. I don't think any of my apps would actually hit that within a year. To be honest.
No, exactly. Yeah. No, it is really interesting, and I think it's as we've spoken about, Key Vault is a really good tool in our toolbox for what we do, for sure, very powerful. Alan, anything else that you want to talk about, or should we wrap it up there?
No, I think that's it on Key Vault. I probably missed a few things, but like I said, I only really use the secrets part of it for what I do day to day. But yeah,
Cool. Thanks very much, Alan. That was a great overview of Key Vault. Just to tease the next episode, I'm going to be talking about the Azure Developer CLI. It's a relatively new CLI which can do some fun and exciting things. So, yeah, let's crack on with that one next time. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do consider subscribing if you'd like to listen to more of this sort of content in the future. We have many topics that we'd like to cover, and your listens and support is what will continue to fuel the podcast going forward.
we also have the ability for you to give us some feedback. Did you enjoy this episode? Disagree with our thoughts, or did I miss something? Please use the form in the notes for the episode to leave us a message. We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks very much, Alan, and we'll see you all in the next one. Cheers.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye.